Nope. Identity-based habits versus outcome-based habits.
Shifted my mindset away from I'm going to the gym because I need to lose weight, I need to get stronger.
You built this habit, you made progress, and then it stopped.
I think a better thought process when it comes to changing your identity around habits is that this isn't even a marathon, this is an ultra marathon.
Where the mind goes.
I've been wanting to ask you, what is a habit you've been trying to build and it has gone poorly?
I wouldn't say this has necessarily gone poorly, but it's definitely something that I had gotten to a really good rhythm of and have struggled recently. And that's journaling. So I think all the way back, let's say even actually specifically, I remember early 2019 starting to build this habit. You've probably heard a lot in the self-help space, the importance of journaling. One of the things I really like about journaling is what it does is it kind of forces you into a linear thought process. And naturally, our brains don't think linearly. Our brains think circularly. They think, they jump from one topic to the other. And you notice this a lot, especially when it comes to things like anxiety, right? A lot of times we have all these ideas swirling around in our head that create an emotion, but there's really not a lot of logic to it. And the thing I like about journaling is it really forces you into a linear thought process. You can only think as quick as you can write, and it's really hard to think about other things if you're writing something down.
Was there something going on at that point in your life that was you were trying to use journaling to help you with, or was it just, no, I just want to try this?
I don't know if there's anything too specific. Some of the things that were going on, this was before Emily, my wife, and I got engaged, so there was a lot of this. We were also going into couples therapy, really trying to explore our relationship, work through some things that we had realized we need to work through before we decided to get engaged. I was a few years into my corporate career, and I was really focused and really interested on the idea of leveling up, moving up into the right, and just being able to be more productive and creating a better output.
Okay.
So those were kind of some of the things going on. For me, journaling was hard to get into. Actually, the way that I got into journaling was through a book called the Daily Stoic Journal. And it was paired with a book called the Daily Stoic, which essentially gave you a prompt or an idea to think about on a daily basis. 365 prompts, 365 ideas, all categorized into different principles of Stoicism. The habit that I was looking to build was to read one passage, one prompt, one piece of the Stoic Journal a day, and then it would give you a prompt to write about and kind of give you an idea of how to focus your thoughts. Some days the prompt would really hit and I would go down a rabbit hole of some ideas, and other days I'd kind of just phone it in, right? But what was really helpful was it was a daily practice. So that process for me was something that took a lot of time, and I don't think I did it every single day, but I was pretty proud of the fact that I remember going back at one point and actually recording how many days I had done this.
So you'd made a lot of progress. You'd really started to build a new habit.
Yeah, I definitely did. What's interesting is, and I'd love to kind of talk a little bit about some of the things that I had journaled through, because there's some pretty important times in my life that I ended up journaling through. But what was interesting was as soon as I got through the book, I definitely lost the consistency of the habit. I still have journals of throughout 2020 and as even recently as this year, where I've had a few days in a row where I've strung together, but nowhere near as consistent as I did when I had the prompts and the reliance on a singular focus of topic for each of those days of journaling.
Cool. Okay, so what you built this habit over a long period of time, meant a lot to you. You had a lot of positive pressure behind it. You made progress, and then it stopped. Why?
I think it stopped because I didn't have anything to anchor the habit to.
Okay.
Before I had, and when I was going through this, I had a bit of a routine that I would anchor the habit to. After I, woke up, brushed my teeth, all that type of stuff, I would go into our spare bedroom. I would sit down, I would do some breathing exercises, and then I would do my journaling. And I would tie those in together as my morning routine, and having that centered around a few things gave me the gave me the ability to kind of form a bit more of a habit. I also think once I'd gone through the journal once, the idea wasn't to just go right back to it again. And I think without having that, I don't want to say pressure, but it was almost, a little bit of pressure to say, well, if I don't go through the book, that I'm not really getting my money's worth out of this journal. It just kind of fell off a little bit.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a powerful story and definitely is lighting up some of the things I feel like I've learned from the book, which is what I wanted to bring to our conversation today, which is Atomic Habits by James Clear. And you're already talking about some of the things in it. I know you've read it, but it wasn't anchored to things. That's something he talks about, is tying different habits together, things you're already doing. And it makes sense that, kind of once those habits that it was anchored to kind of stopped because of your environment, you stopped that habit. Mm-hmm. So that makes sense. The reason I really wanted to talk about this was for the last 5 months, / even longer than that, honestly, for the last year, I have not really lived in one place. I've been staying at my friends' houses, including you. I've been traveling for 5 months through Asia. And so feeling stable and grounded in rhythm has had nothing to do with my external environment. It's been only tied to my habits. And that was not something that I put a ton of value in at first. And then over time, as I was like, I need some sense of stability, I became really interested in habits and tried to build my own and had some successes and some failures. And as I'm now coming back, I'm realizing like, okay, it will be easier after having read this book. I think it's gonna be a lot easier to set up certain habits that I had struggled with even while I was traveling. I think one of the big ones was around diet, right? You're constantly moving to new places. The food you have access to, your ability to cook. Most of the time I'm not staying in places where I can have a kitchen even. I'm staying in a hostel. You go grocery shopping, but really only there for 3 days, so half of it goes to waste, and so you just end up eating out. So much is changing. However, I did find that for the first time in my life, I was going to the gym incredibly regularly despite all of these other things. And I was sitting there going, why? Like why have I been able to achieve something that honestly, in other parts of my life, I have way more stability, and suddenly I'm able to stay pretty dang consistent with this very challenging habit. I mean, you're a personal trainer. Your job is to help people, build that habit, and you know how hard that can be. And I was kind of reading this book going, why? And there's an element of the book that I think is really underemphasized. A lot of people talk about this book. It's been out for a while. It's a New York Times bestseller. A lot of people have heard about it. And they'll talk about a lot of these specific tactics of it. But the piece that I think is really fundamentally most powerful is when they talk about identity-based habits versus outcome-based habits. And what I mean by, or how I've kind of interpreted that is, I used to set the goal of, I want to go to the gym because I want to be healthier, have better mental health, get more fit ultimately, right? Those were outcomes. And I think partially, honestly, having you as my personal trainer tied with just needing to work out for a sense of stability over time, this identity-based relationship with working out evolved. It wasn't a conscious intention. I didn't go into it saying, this is going to be a change, right? But over time, I found myself, I don't think of going to the gym as an outcome that I'm trying to get to. I think of it more of, I am someone who goes to the gym. Mm-hmm. It's this fundamental pivot away from, I work out to I am a gym goer, right? That's that identity-based shift.
Where did you feel that shift start to occur? Was it after a certain amount of days? Was it something that you started with this identity shift and then built the habit around that? Tell me a little bit more about, with your experience specifically, when you started to feel that shift.
I think I felt it most on the trip itself. For about 2 years before that, I had been trying really hard to build the habit of going to the gym. And before you, I even had another personal trainer, right? And I started to make some progress. I started to see the habit form, and then it died off. And then I worked with you, and I feel like that was the most consistent. And then I left and was traveling around, and that started to die off. And I noticed that I saw a big shift in my mental health when I wasn't working out regularly, because I had had enough of that positive change where I felt so much better over a long period of time, where I finally started getting those long-term benefits of my mental health. And then that kind of went away. And for a while, I didn't do too much about it. The first 6 months I was traveling still in the United States, and I was still off and on. But then once I moved to traveling internationally, even less of my environment was in my control. And so to me, going to the gym became that thing that was this reliable place to rely on my mental health. And so I found myself kind of needing to go to the gym. And in that need, in that process, I started going, I'm someone who actually is a gym goer. Like, I had another friend who works out a lot, came to visit me in Thailand. And he, I've always thought of him as someone who is much better about going to the gym than me. And in general, he is. He's very consistent. And he was on vacation for about 3 weeks, and he didn't go to the gym very much. And that's, to me, where I noticed that change. I was like, I have now changed. I have all of these excuses not to go to the gym. I'm traveling for 5 months. It's a trip of a lifetime. There's all this amazing food. My environment's changing all the time. And the moment I arrived in this one small town in Thailand, I had realized over time, the first thing I have to do is go find the gym. That's like the first activity. Once I drop my bags, I just have to go find the gym. Because if I don't, it won't happen. And again, it started building to this point where it's like, I'm seeing going to the gym as part of my identity of being healthy and happy as a person. And it stopped being about achieving a certain weight. It stopped being about getting to a certain level of fitness. I still want those things. Those are still goals I have, but it's not why I'm going to the gym. And I think that's why I started to go so much more consistently, because that became part of me. You know what I mean? And so I'm curious, in your own kind of journey through life, have there been habits that you've built or even habits you've broken tied to this idea of identity-based habit building and breaking?
Not to leverage your exact habit, but I mean, as someone who's a personal trainer, nutrition coach, a lot of people seem to think that it's easy for me to get to the gym regularly. But it's not. One of the things that I struggle with up until this day is this idea that I still have to get myself into the gym. It's not a natural thing. This kind of reminds me of this phrase that I heard from a different podcast. It's from someone named Tom Bilyeu. He's now mostly in the self-help space, how to build a better mindset, but he actually is the one that founded Quest Nutrition, Quest bars. He has a phrase that is honestly a lot what we're talking about here, which is, I'm the type of person that. And it really resonates with me because instead of thinking about this as something that I'm trying to do from an outcome perspective, I like to think of it as I'm the type of person that goes to the gym regularly. And one of the things that I realized is that over the last year and a half, I've been more consistent with my gym going than any other time in my life. And part of that is this realization that as someone who's a personal trainer, I do need to kind of practice what I preach. But I've also shifted my mindset away from I'm going to the gym because I need to lose weight, I need to get stronger. And even though I do have goals around performance and longevity, I pride myself on being the type of person that goes to the gym regularly. For me, that's what that means is I don't go every single day. I also don't go every single week the same amount of days, but every single week I'm going to the gym. And that's really what clicked for me, is that it doesn't have to be this thing where I'm hitting X amount of days in Y amount of weeks. It's just that over a long enough timeline, if someone was to audit my life, they would say, oh, one of the things that this person does regularly is go to the gym. And that's what really clicked for me, was in shifting it from an outcome-based belief, using your words, to an identity-based belief.
Part of the juiciness, I think, of what I wanted to get today in our conversation was, what are areas that we're still caught in outcome-based habits, right? I'd be curious to know if there was something that comes to mind for you that is a habit you really want to build or that you want to break, that you still think you're caught in the goal rather than shifting the identity. Even just learning from what you just said, your transformation around your own journey of going to the gym. What's something else that you could pull from that and apply it?
Let's take journaling, for instance, since we talked about that already. One of the reasons I haven't felt as like I've been as consistent as I have been in the past is because I was journaling before for the outcome of journaling, right? I was learning from other people. This is the value of journaling. This is what you get from it, right? The linear thought processes, also the ability to go back and kind of learn from yourself and say, oh, this is what I was thinking about at that period of time, right? As valuable as those are, I never really considered myself a person that journals. And I don't know exactly why I haven't been able to do that, but I think part of that comes from understanding that maybe this is very similar to how people talk about meditation, right? The value of meditation isn't in the actual act of meditation. It's in the ability to drop into a meditative state in times of high stress, in times of need, right? The value of journaling isn't necessarily a daily value. It's not something that I immediately get a return on value of. It's the fact that when times are tough, when stress is high, when I don't know even what I'm thinking in my own head, I can always go right back to the journal, and that's the first thing I think about. Right now, that's not the first thing I think about.
And I feel like that's what I really have learned from you about going to the gym. And before I really have had this shift from outcome to identity, I feel like you were teaching me that in just how you approach your business, right? I feel like you've always said to any of your clients, including me, it's not about, of course we want to get fit, but that's not the goal. The goal is to feel good in your body. The goal is to go hiking. The goal is to go skiing. Like, I feel like you're such a proponent of this identity-based, habit building around going to the gym, of like, it's making your life that you already want to live better, and you're tying those things together. And I think that's a powerful shift for people, and different in your approach to helping people, with their own fitness. So I think that's cool, and I respect and appreciate that, because I've gained that from you.
You've heard the phrase, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Right?
Totally.
I think a better thought process when it comes to changing your identity around habits is that this isn't even a marathon. This is an ultra marathon, right? This is a 100-miler, right? This is something that we're hopefully going to do for the rest of our lives, right? These identity-based habits they don't have an end date to them. Yeah. They're something that we plan to do indefinitely and plan to only continue to improve on and get better at over time. So shifting our mindset from, let's take going back to journaling. I had a book that lasted 1 year. There was an end date to this habit that I was building, right? And as powerful as the habit was, I journaled through March of 2019, where I had multiple pulmonary embolisms that left me in the hospital for 2 days and honestly on the verge of death. I journaled through my proposal to Emily in May of 2019. I journaled through some of the hardest periods in my corporate life, my professional career towards the end of 2019. There was a lot of things that I can go back on now and open this journal and say, wow, that's where my head was at. That's where my thought process was. But it was a year that I had set out to do this for. And I think if I had switched my mindset from I'm going to do this for a year to I'm going to do this for the rest of my life, I do think that identity-based habit building would have been a little bit clearer in my head, and I would have understood, okay, this isn't something that has an end date to it. This is something that it's an ultra marathon. I'm going to be doing this for the foreseeable future. I'm going to be doing this for not just to get the outcome of it from a daily basis, but from a yearly, a decade-long basis, and even longer than that, which is I want to be able to drop in and get down to journaling and do it, not necessarily just once a day in the morning when it's tied to my morning routine, but when I need to, when I don't need to, and have it be that first thing that I go to when I'm stressed or when I'm feeling overwhelmed. And I think that's where identity-based habits really, I think that's the real value of identity-based habits, is it becomes something that you do without having to think about it, without having to, using James Clear's words, without having to tie it to something easier or something simpler or something more enjoyable. It's just something that you do.
Because it's part of you.
Exactly.
Listening to you, some things are connecting in my own head around my interest in running a business and being an entrepreneur. I think when I started, it was very much like, I want to do this as long as I can be successful by X date, or as long as I can make X amount of money. And I'm realizing in this moment, I don't really want to do that anymore. I think, I do need to make a certain amount of money to survive, of course. And so I might need to get a certain part-time job at some point if my business doesn't grow the way I want. But I'm never going to stop wanting to be an entrepreneur. That's part of me. And I need to start approaching my business and my life as like, I enjoy doing this. And so no matter what my financial situation is, no matter if I have another job or not, if I have kids or family, like, that's going to be part of me, creating things that benefit people's lives in the world, right? So how do I approach my business from an identity-based habit approach rather than just achieving X amount of money, right? Because I do see that with other entrepreneurs. It's like they go into it with this very outcome-based goal, and then they hit that goal and they want to sell the business. right? And if that's what you want to do, that's cool. But I see people burn out and lose interest in what they're doing because I think they've set that goal, right? They're setting a goal that essentially at some point they lose interest and they exit. But if you're playing the infinite game with yourself, you're going to enjoy your business for the rest of your life.
Where the mind goes.